Picture this. Marina Santos stands at attention, her hotel uniform crisp despite the 12-hour shift she's just completed. Across from her, Mr. Davenport, the hotel manager, paces behind his mahogany desk, his face flushed with anger. Do you have any idea what you've done? You gave away a $450 per night suite. That's theft, Marina. Corporate policy is absolutely clear. Marina doesn't flinch. Sir, he was a veteran. He showed me his military ID. It was pouring rain and he had nowhere to go. The room was going to be empty anyway. Mr. Davenport slams his palm on the desk. That is not your decision to make. You're fired, effective immediately. Turn in your keycard and uniform by end of day. Marina's eyes sting with tears she refuses to shed. She'd worked at the luminous Grand Hotel for 7 years without a single complaint. 7 years of perfect attendance, of guests requesting her by name, of training new staff, all erased because she couldn't bear to see a limping veteran caught in a thunderstorm with nowhere to sleep. I understand, sir, she says, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. I'll clear out my locker now. As Marina turns to leave, Mr. Davenport adds with a dismissive wave, and don't think about using us as a reference. Little did he know, his smug satisfaction was about to be the shortest-lived emotion of his career. Let me take you back to where it all began. Marina Santos had always been exceptional at her job. At 35, she'd worked her way up from a teenage housekeeper at budget motels to the head of guest services at the prestigious Luminous Grand Hotel in downtown Chicago. Her hands, though worn from years of labor, moved with practiced precision as she prepared rooms, ensuring each pillow was fluffed to perfection and every surface gleamed. What set Marina apart wasn't just her attention to detail, it was her genuine care for guests. She remembered returning visitors by name, kept notes on their preferences, and often left thoughtful touches. A favorite chocolate on the pillow for the businessman who mentioned missing his daughter's birthday, or extra towels for the elderly. Couple who never asked but always needed them. Her colleagues admired her efficiency. In the time it took most maids to complete 3 rooms, Marina could finish 5, without cutting corners. This efficiency had earned her the coveted Employee of the Year award 3 times running, with a golden pin she wore proudly on her uniform. The luminous Grand Hotel itself was a marvel of luxury. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers, situated in the heart of Chicago's business district. The smell of fresh flowers permeated the lobby, while soft classical music created an atmosphere of refined elegance. Marina took pride in being part of such a prestigious establishment, often pausing to admire the sunset reflecting off the building's glass facade before starting her evening shifts. Initially, Marina had thought well of Mr. Davenport when he took over management 8 months ago. He seemed professional, if a bit distant, with his tailored suits and meticulously groomed appearance. She'd noticed how his eyes lingered on the wealthier guests, how his smile widened proportionally to the size of potential tips. Still, Marina believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. What she didn't know was that Davenport had been watching her too, not with admiration, but with calculation. As she efficiently moved through the hotel's grand hallways one rainy Tuesday evening, she didn't notice his narrowed gaze following her from the security monitor room, or hear his irritated mutter about her being too independent for her own good. Their paths first truly crossed on a stormy Thursday evening. Marina was organizing the supply closet when her walkie-talkie crackled. "Marina, front desk, we have a situation," came the voice of Thomas, the young receptionist. When Marina arrived at the lobby, she found Thomas looking uncomfortable, as Mr. Davenport spoke to a man in a worn military jacket. The man stood straight despite visible discomfort, water dripping from his clothes onto the marble floor. "Sir, as I've explained, we're fully booked tonight," Mr. Davenport was saying, though Marina knew this wasn't true. The hotel was only at 60% capacity. She'd checked the system during her break. "I understand," the man said quietly. "Thank you for your time." As he turned to leave, Marina noticed his pronounced limp and the military insignia on his jacket. "Mr. Davenport," Marina said, stepping forward, "there's actually the corner suite on the 4th floor that's available. It was flagged for maintenance, but the issue was just a television remote needing batteries. I fixed it this morning." Davenport's face tightened. "Mrs. Santos, may I speak with you privately?" In the small office behind the reception desk, his pleasant facade disappeared. "Don't ever contradict me in front of guests," he hissed. "That man clearly can't afford our rates. I don't want his type bringing down the image of this establishment." Marina blinked in surprise. "His type, sir? He's a veteran, and he didn't ask for charity. He was willing to pay the standard rate. The standard rate isn't the issue. Look at him, worn clothes, no reservation. He's not luminous material." Davenport straightened his tie. "I decide who stays in this hotel, Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir, Marina replied, a new understanding of her boss settling uncomfortably in her stomach. As the weeks passed, Marina witnessed Davenport's prejudices play out in increasingly troubling ways. He implemented an unofficial dress code for the lobby, instructing security to gently redirect visitors in casual attire to the service entrance. He began scrutinizing Marina's work with unprecedented intensity, finding fault with minor details no guest would ever notice. The throw pillows on the penthouse sofa are at a 43-degree angle, not 45, he noted during an inspection, making a show of marking it on his clipboard while the newer staff looked on nervously. Marina maintained her professionalism. I'll correct that immediately, Mr. Davenport. Thank you for pointing it out. Later that same day, Marina overheard him speaking with a potential guest on the phone. I'm afraid we don't have any rooms matching that description available for those dates, he said smoothly, though Marina had just updated the availability chart showing multiple suitable rooms. After he hung up, Marina approached cautiously. Sir, I couldn't help overhearing. We actually have 3 junior suites available for those dates. Davenport's smile didn't reach his eyes. The caller had an accent I couldn't quite place. Experience has taught me those guests often cause problems with noise complaints and excessive demands. Better to avoid the headache entirely. Marina's discomfort grew when she noticed Mr. Davenport's different behavior toward wealthy guests. When the Robertsons, a well-known family in Chicago's social scene, arrived without a reservation, Davenport personally arranged to upgrade another guest to make a suite available. The same suite he'd claimed needed maintenance when the veteran inquired. The hotel's head chef, Eduardo, noticed Marina's troubled expression in the staff break room. Davenport getting to you too? He asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. Marina sighed. I don't understand how he became manager with these attitudes. It goes against everything this hotel used to stand for. Eduardo lowered his voice. His uncle is on the board of the hotel group, but you didn't hear that from. This explanation made sense of Davenport's untouchable air, the way he flaunted policies that would get anyone else fired. It also explained why complaints seemed to disappear into thin air. When Mrs. Abernathy, a regular guest in her 70s who'd been coming to the hotel for decades, requested Marina's assistance specifically, Davenport intervened. I'll be handling Mrs. Abernathy's requests personally from now on, he informed Marina. 2 days later, Mrs. Abernathy stopped Marina in the hallway. Dear, did I offend you somehow? I asked for your help with my bags yesterday and was told you were unavailable. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Abernathy. I was never informed of your request, Marina explained, her heart sinking at the realization that Davenport was now actively undermining her relationships with guests. The situation escalated when Marina discovered that room service charges were being added to the bills of guests who hadn't ordered anything. When she brought this to Davenport's attention, his response chilled her. Some guests don't keep careful track of their expenses. It's hardly our fault if they can't remember what they... He leaned forward. Marina, your job is to clean rooms and follow instructions. Leave the business decisions to those qualified to make them, unless you'd prefer to seek employment elsewhere. That night, Marina couldn't sleep. The values that had guided her career, honesty, service, respect, were being violated daily, and her attempts to address the problems through proper channels had only put her own position at risk. The next morning, she made a decision. If traditional methods wouldn't work, she would need to document everything. She began keeping meticulous notes of all discrepancies she observed. Rooms marked as unavailable in the system but clearly empty. Additional charges on guest bills. Maintenance issues reported, but never addressed. She used her phone to photograph empty rooms that had been listed as occupied, took screenshots of the reservation system showing availability that Davenport denied to certain callers, and recorded dates and times of every questionable instruction she received. What are you doing? Thomas asked one day, catching her photographing a room service receipt. Marina hesitated before deciding to trust him. Building a case. Davenport is discriminating against guests and possibly committing fraud. Someone needs to stop him. Thomas looked nervous but nodded. The way he treated that family from India last week was horrible. I'll help you if I can. With Tomas occasionally providing access to the reservation system when Marina wasn't on duty, her documentation grew more comprehensive. Eduardo contributed evidence of food wastage, expensive meals prepared for guests who didn't exist, with the costs somehow vanishing from the accounts. The breaking point came 6 weeks later. Marina was working a double shift when she saw the same veteran from months earlier approaching the front desk. The man looked even more worn down than before, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. From her position near the elevators, Marina could hear the conversation clearly. Good evening. I called earlier about a room, the veteran said. The receptionist, new and clearly intimidated by Davenport's hovering presence, looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see a reservation under your name." "I spoke with a Mr. Davenport," the veteran explained. "He said you had availability and quoted me a rate." Davenport stepped forward with a practiced smile. "Ah, yes. Unfortunately, there's been a misunderstanding. I quoted you our standard rate, but for tonight, we only have premium suites available at $750 per night, plus deposit." Marina watched the veteran's face fall. She knew from her morning inventory that the hotel had at least 12 standard rooms available. "I see," the veteran said quietly. "That's beyond my budget. Thank you anyway." As he turned to leave, Marina's mind raced. Outside, the weather had turned violent, with thunder rumbling and rain pelting the windows. The man had mentioned earlier he was in town for medical treatment at the VA hospital, and Marina knew the nearest affordable hotel was miles away. In that moment, something within her rebelled against every injustice she'd witnessed. Before she could reconsider, Marina approached the veteran. "Sir," she said quietly, slipping him a keycard. "Room 412 is prepared and available. The system shows it as under maintenance, but it's perfectly comfortable." The veteran looked surprised. "But your manager said the room would be empty otherwise," Marina assured him. "Just, please be discreet." What Marina didn't realize was that her interaction had been captured on the lobby's security camera, which Davenport checked routinely before leaving each night. The next morning brought the confrontation in Davenport's office, ending with Marina's termination. As she cleaned out her locker, several colleagues expressed their sympathy but kept their distance, afraid for their own positions. Only Tomas dared to approach her. "This isn't right, Marina. Everyone knows you're the heart of this place." Marina managed to smile. "It's okay. Some things are worth standing up for." As she exited through the employee entrance one last time, Marina felt a strange mix of loss and liberation. 7 years of her life had been dedicated to these walls, but perhaps it was time for a change. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost missed the sleek midnight blue Lamborghini pulling up to the hotel's main entrance. Marina paused, watching as a man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped out, handing his keys to the wide-eyed valet. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it immediately. His confident stride and the respectful nods he received from the doormen suggested someone of importance. It wasn't until he glanced in her direction that recognition hit her. Despite the expensive suit replacing the worn military jacket, the face belonged to the veteran she'd helped the night before. Marina hurried away before he could notice her, confused by this turn of events. Had she been deceived? Was the man not a veteran at all, but some wealthy guest playing a role? The thought made her stomach turn. What Marina didn't know as she boarded the bus home was that Alexander Reeves, the man from the Lamborghini, was indeed a decorated Marine Corps veteran. He was also the CEO of Reeves Hospitality Group, one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the country, known for its commitment to ethical business practices and veteran support programs. Alexander had a habit of personally experiencing the service at competitor hotels incognito, presenting as someone who might be judged by appearance rather than status. It helped him understand how his own hotels might be treating similar guests when he wasn't looking. What he'd witnessed at the luminous Grand Hotel had been worse than anything he'd encountered before. The discrimination had been blatant. The dishonesty, shameless. Only one employee had shown true hospitality and moral courage: Marina Santos. While Marina spent the evening updating her resume and wondering how she would make next month's rent, Alexander Reeves was making a phone call to the luminous Grand Hotel's corporate headquarters. The next morning, Marina was surprised to receive a call from an unknown number. "Is this Marina Santos?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "Yes, this is she. My name is Clarissa Williams, assistant to Mr. Alexander Reeves of Reeves Hospitality Group. Mr. Reeves would like to meet with you this afternoon at 2 p.m. if you're available." Marina's confusion must have been evident in her silence, because Clarissa continued. "This pertains to an incident at the luminous Grand Hotel yesterday. Mr. Reeves was most impressed with your actions. Curious, and with nothing to lose, Marina agreed to the meeting at Reeves' corporate headquarters downtown. The modern glass building couldn't have been more different from the classic elegance of the luminous. As Marina was escorted to the top floor, she still couldn't understand why a hotel magnate would want to meet with her, a recently fired maid. The mystery was solved as soon as she entered Alexander Reeves's office and recognized the veteran from the night before, now in a custom suit behind an impressive desk. "Ms. Santos," he said warmly, standing to greet her. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Marina sat, still processing the transformation. "You're not just a veteran." Alexander smiled. "I am absolutely a veteran. 8 years Marine Corps. But you're right. That's not all I am. He gestured to the office around them. What you saw last night was something I do regularly. I visit hotels as an ordinary person, sometimes even someone who might be discriminated against, to see how they truly treat their guests. And the Lamborghini? Marina couldn't help asking. That was, admittedly, for dramatic effect, Alexander acknowledged with a slight smile. I wanted your former boss to see exactly who he'd turned away, but I'm getting ahead of myself. He leaned forward. Ms. Santos, what you did last night was extraordinary. You risked your job to help someone in need, standing up against clear discrimination. That's exactly the kind of integrity I look for in my organization. Marina finally found her voice. I appreciate that, Mr. Reeves, but I'm not sure why I'm here. 2 reasons, Alexander replied. First, I'd like to offer you a position as the new general manager of our Chicago flagship hotel, opening next month. Your 7 years of experience, combined with your demonstrated values, make you uniquely qualified. Marina stared at him in disbelief. General manager? But I've never held a management position. You've been managing guest experiences for years, Ms. Santos. The administrative skills can be taught. Integrity cannot. He slid a folder across the desk. This contains the details of the offer, including a salary that I believe you'll find generous. Marina opened the folder and nearly gasped at the figure. It was over 3 times what she'd been making. And the second reason? She asked, finding her composure. Alexander's expression turned more serious. I purchased the Luminous Grand Hotel this morning. You purchased an entire hotel overnight? When you own 46 hotels, adding a 47th isn't complicated, especially when its corporate parent is eager to avoid the scandal of discrimination and potential fraud. Which brings me to my request. Before you start your new position, would you be willing to return to the Luminous tomorrow, not as an employee, but as my representative, to help me understand exactly what's been happening there? Marina thought of all the documentation she'd gathered, the colleagues who'd been mistreated, the guests who'd been deceived. I would be happy to help, Mr. Reeves. The next morning, Marina felt a strange sense of déjà vu as she approached the Luminous Grand's familiar entrance. This time, however, she walked through the front door, dressed not in her uniform, but in a professional suit provided by Reeves' Hospitality Group. The lobby buzzed with unusual activity. Men and women in business attire moved purposefully through the space, carrying tablets and clipboards. At the reception desk, Mr. Davenport was engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with a woman in a sharp suit. This is completely unprecedented. You can't just come in and demand access to our systems without proper... His protest cut short when he spotted Marina. What are you doing here? You were terminated. Before Marina could respond, the woman beside him spoke. Mr. Davenport, as I was explaining, ownership of this hotel transferred to Reeves' Hospitality Group as of 9 a.m. this morning. We're conducting a full audit, and Ms. Santos is here at Mr. Reeves' personal request. The color drained from Davenport's face. Reeves' Hospitality? There must be some mistake. No mistake, came a confident voice from behind them. Alexander Reeves approached, extending his hand to Marina. Ms. Santos, thank you for joining us. I trust everything is in order? Marina nodded, unable to suppress a small smile at Davenport's growing horror as recognition dawned on his face. You're the man from last night, Davenport stammered. The veteran, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Reeves, U.S. Marine Corps, retired, Alexander confirmed coldly. And now, your boss. He turned to Marina. Ms. Santos has provided us with extensive documentation of concerning practices at this hotel. Discriminatory treatment of guests, fraudulent charges, manipulation of the reservation system. Alexander's gaze returned to Davenport. Care to explain? This is absurd. You can't possibly believe the word of a maid over a professional manager with my credentials. Davenport sputtered. Actually, we've already verified several of her claims, interjected the woman with the clipboard. The reservation system logs clearly show available rooms being marked as unavailable for certain guests, and this morning's financial audit has already flagged numerous discrepancies. Marina watched as the reality of the situation sank in for Davenport. His eyes darted around the lobby, perhaps seeking an escape or ally. Finding neither, Alexander addressed him with cold precision. Mr. Davenport, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings, after which you will leave the premises. As if on cue, 2 security officers appeared beside Davenport, whose face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this to me. My uncle is on the board of Parkside Hotel Group. Yes, we know. Alexander finished for him. Former board member, I should say. He resigned this morning when presented with evidence of your activities. It seems even family has its limits when fraud is involved. What followed was a procession that many hotel staff would later describe as the most satisfying walk of shame they'd ever witnessed. Davenport, escorted by security, moved through the hotel corridors where he had once strutted with such authority, past employees who now watched with undisguised relief or, in some cases, barely contained smiles. By afternoon, word of the ownership change and Davenport's dismissal had spread throughout the hotel. Staff members who had previously kept their distance from Marina now approached her with stories of their own experiences under Davenport's management. "He made me turn away a family last month because their children were too noisy in the lobby," confessed one receptionist. "They had a confirmed reservation and everything. He told me to add mini-bar charges to room 623 even though I'd just restocked it and nothing was taken," added another staff member. The stories continued, building a picture of systematic discrimination and dishonesty that went beyond even what Marina had documented. Alexander listened to each account, occasionally asking clarifying questions, his expression growing more resolved with each revelation. By evening, news vans had gathered outside the hotel, drawn by rumors of the sudden ownership change and the dramatic dismissal of the manager. Alexander handled the media with practiced ease, emphasizing Reeves' Hospitality's commitment to ethical practices without directly addressing the specific allegations against Davenport or the previous management. "We're conducting a thorough review of operations," he told reporters. "Our goal is to ensure that every guest receives the respectful, honest service they deserve." The real transformation, however, began the following day. Alexander called an all-staff meeting in the hotel's grand ballroom, with Marina standing by his side. "As many of you already know, Ms. Santos will be leaving us soon to manage our new Chicago flagship," he announced, to murmurs of surprise and approval. "But before she goes, she'll be working with me to implement immediate changes here." Those changes came swiftly. Discriminatory practices were explicitly forbidden in a new, comprehensive policy that all employees were required to sign. An anonymous reporting system was established for staff to flag concerns without fear of retaliation. The reservation system was overhauled to create an unalterable log of all room availabilities and assignments. Perhaps most significantly, Alexander announced the creation of a program offering discounted rates to veterans and active military personnel, with the first 10 rooms each night available at cost. "We honor those who serve," read the new signs in the lobby. "Please inquire about our military appreciation rates." Within weeks, the atmosphere of the hotel had transformed. Staff moved through the halls with renewed pride and purpose. Guests commented on the warm, genuine service they received. Even the physical space seemed brighter somehow, as if relieved of an invisible weight. For Marina, these weeks of transition were bittersweet. She took satisfaction in helping reshape the hotel into what it should have been all along, but she also knew her time there was coming to an end. On her final day, Alexander hosted a farewell gathering in the same ballroom where he'd announced the changes. Every staff member attended, along with several regular guests who had heard Marina was leaving. "Before we bid farewell to Ms. Santos," Alexander said, addressing the assembled crowd, "I want to share something with all of you. The night I met Marina, I was conducting what my team calls a blind stay, experiencing a hotel as someone who might be judged by appearance rather than status." He paused, looking around the room. "What I found at this hotel was deeply troubling, but also profoundly inspiring. While one person represented the worst of our industry, prejudice, dishonesty, self-interest, another represented its very best. Marina didn't know who I was. She had no reason to help me except basic human decency and the courage to stand up for what's right, even at personal cost." Alexander turned to Marina. "That kind of integrity isn't just rare in the hospitality industry, it's rare in the world, and it's exactly what builds great organizations and changes lives." To Marina's surprise, Mrs. Abernathy stepped forward from the crowd, leaning slightly on her cane. "I've been staying at this hotel for 32 years, the elderly woman announced, "and I've never been prouder to call myself a guest than in these past weeks. Marina, dear, you've always been exceptional, but now everyone knows it." 1 year later, the Reeves flagship Chicago celebrated its first anniversary under Marina's management. The hotel had quickly gained recognition as one of the city's premier destinations, known not just for its luxury, but for its exceptional service and inclusive atmosphere. Marina's office wall displayed framed reviews mentioning staff by name, alongside a simple shadow box containing her old luminous grand name tag, a reminder of where she'd started and what she stood for. When she occasionally encountered former luminous colleagues, now working under much improved conditions, they would share updates about the hotel's continued transformation. Davenport, they informed her, had struggled to find employment in the industry after word of his practices spread. He'd eventually taken a position at a small airport motel in another state, where his customary arrogance had reportedly diminished considerably. More satisfying was news of the Veterans Program, which had expanded to all Reeves hotels nationwide, providing not just discounted accommodations, but employment opportunities for former service members transitioning to civilian life. On quiet evenings, Marina sometimes reflected on the strange twist of fate that had changed her life. One simple act of decency, providing shelter to someone in need, had cascaded into consequences she could never have imagined. During the hotel's anniversary celebration, Alexander raised a toast to Marina and the staff she had assembled. In hospitality, we often talk about luxury amenities and exclusive experiences, he said, but we sometimes forget the most fundamental purpose of any hotel: to provide shelter, safety, and dignity to travelers away from home. He looked directly at Marina. Some people understand that instinctively. They know that true service isn't about status or appearance. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person who walks through our doors. That's the foundation this hotel was built on, and why it will continue to thrive. Later, as guests mingled and celebrated, a young man in a Marine Corps dress uniform approached Marina. "Ms. Santos? I'm not sure if you remember me. I stayed at the Luminous last year during a medical follow-up. You helped me when—" "Of course I remember you," Marina interrupted warmly. "Thomas, right? How are you doing?" "Much better, thank you. Actually, I work for Mr. Reeves now, coordinating the Veterans Program. I just wanted to thank you personally. What you did that night, it mattered." Marina smiled. "I'm glad to hear that, though I should probably be thanking you if not for that night. I might still be making beds instead of managing a hotel. I think you'd have found your way here eventually," Thomas replied. "People like you always do." As Marina looked around at the thriving hotel she now led, filled with guests from all walks of life receiving the same respectful service, she thought perhaps he was right. Standing up for what's right might come with risks, but it also opens doors to possibilities you never imagined. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up against unfair treatment, even when it might cost them personally? Or perhaps you've been that person yourself, choosing integrity over convenience? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of justice served with a side of sweet revenge, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories of people fighting back against entitlement and discrimination. Remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness and courage can create the biggest waves of change.